In Monkie Kid Season 5, we are introduced to the nine-headed demon who is connected to the chaos and wanted to go back into it. The end of Season 5 saw the end of the cycle that Nuwa created to protect the world from the chaos. Now it seems that beings from the chaos may be able to get into the world. But what exactly is this chaos? Well, in Chinese mythology, the universe was once in a state of formless chaos before the creation of the world. The chaos was when everything was still mixed together and not yet separated. However, the elements were separated to form the heavens and the earth. The chaos held the potential for creation and has been described as a cosmic egg, and this idea is emphasized in the story of Pangu. Pangu was born within the chaos, within the cosmic egg, but broke free, dispersing the contents and creating the heavens and earth. Additionally, some versions of the myth have it so that he dies, and his corpse becomes the universe. And Pangu is actually referenced in Monkie Kid, in Season 5, Episode 2, when Sun Wukong talks about the history of the Pillar of Heaven, we first briefly see this, an axe slicing through the darkness. This is in reference to the myth of Pangu breaking out of the Chaos Egg by cutting through it with an axe. And this is actually detailed in Journey to the West, the book Monkie Kid is based on. At the very beginning of the book, it talks about the chaos and how Pangu broke out of it, which caused creation to form. But what is interesting is that there are some items that originate from this era of chaos. One example is the gourd owned by the gold and silver-horned demons. Of note is the fact that this very gourd featured in Monkie Kid. The Jade Rabbit also alleges to have owned an item from the time of chaos. However, the most significant item from the time of chaos is Monkey King's staff. Sun Wukong's staff is explicitly said to be a treasure handed down from Chaos's time. This is likely why, at the end of Monkie Kid Season 5, the staff glitched with chaos energy. The staff is a relic from the chaos, and it is reacting to the chaos leaking into the world. But what if, in Monkie Kid, the reason Sun Wukong is able to wield the staff is because Sun Wukong himself is linked to the chaos? In Journey to the West, there are references to the chaos being linked to Sun Wukong. The first is where Sun Wukong says, "Since the division of chaos and the creation of heaven and earth, and since the flower fruit mountain gave birth to me, I did search all around for an enlightened teacher." The wording of this almost seems to indicate that Sun Wukong's essence, his being, existed during the time of the chaos. And then we have this passage where Sun Wukong is called the Primordial in the Anthony CU translation, with primordial meaning existing at or from the beginning of time. Additionally, the WJF Jenner translation translates it to say that Sun Wukong is from the primal chaos. Perhaps this could all be because Sun Wukong's stone may have been nourished with chaos energies. Journey to the West says that Sun Wukong came from an immortal stone, which, since the creation of the world, had been nourished for a long period by the seeds of heaven and earth and by the essences of the sun and the moon. The egg was nourished by the seeds of heaven and earth, and heaven and earth were said to be made from the chaos being separated. So, it would make sense for this to mean that Sun Wukong was created from chaos energies. And Sun Wukong and his egg being nourished by the chaos would explain why Nuwa used Sun Wukong's egg to make MK, since he is the harbinger of chaos, and his role was to sacrifice himself to the Pillar of Heaven to keep the chaos out of the world. But Macaque is also linked to the chaos, as we see that he has chaos powers like the nine-headed demon. So, how and why does Macaque have chaos powers? There are a few options, with the most obvious being that he made a deal to get them, since that is what the nine-headed demon suggested. I made this video expanding on this possibility and who he could have made a deal with. But Macaque did seem surprised when the nine-headed demon asked if he made a deal, which could mean he was just surprised that the nine-headed demon guessed correctly, or perhaps he made a deal but doesn't remember doing so. After all, there are quite a few things in the show that hint at characters' memories being messed with, which I discuss more in this video. However, there is of course the possibility that Macaque didn't get his powers from a deal and the nine-headed demon just guessed wrong. So, there are two other possibilities. The first involves Macaque's origins in the original book. In Journey to the West, the six-eared macaque is very heavily implied to be a manifestation of Sun Wukong's mind. The six-eared macaque is literally the other half of Sun Wukong being made from him. This is an extensive topic, but the most significant thing is Sun Wukong and the six-eared macaque are referred to as the two hearts, which some versions translate to two minds throughout the text. This links to a concept in China about double-mindedness or double-heartedness, in which one's self is split or conflicted. One example of this is when the Buddha says to his congregation, "You are all of one mind, but take a look at the two minds in competition and strife arriving here." He is referring to Sun Wukong and Macaque and is essentially saying, all of us here are of one mind, but Sun Wukong's mind has been split in two and he is fighting himself. Anthony Cu, one of the most highly regarded Journey to the West scholars who produced the most accurate Journey to the West translation, also discusses how the six-eared macaque is literally a split-off part of Sun Wukong's mind in his commentary and footnotes. Anyway, so far, Macaque in Monkie Kid hasn't been confirmed to be made from Sun Wukong like in the original book. However, we haven't currently got a whole lot of Macaque's backstory or what went down with him and Sun Wukong. So it is totally possible that the Monkie Kid writers adapted Macaque's Journey to the West origins and made it so that Macaque is made from Sun Wukong in some way. For example, Macaque could be Sun Wukong's shadow come to life, or possibly a hair clone of Sun Wukong, since we saw in Duplicate Nation that hair clones can gain sentience and get their own personalities. Whatever the case, if Macaque is made from Sun Wukong in some way, and if Sun Wukong is linked to the chaos because his egg was nourished with chaos energies, then that could explain why Macaque has chaos powers. As to why Macaque would manifest chaos powers before Sun Wukong, maybe Macaque's origins mean he and his powers are more unstable. But that is the first option. The second option is a bit more far-fetched, but still possible. In Journey to the West, Sun Wukong and Macaque are part of a group called the Four Spiritual Primates. The other two spiritual primates are only briefly mentioned, but the Monkie Kid writers could use them in the show. Additionally, in Chinese mythology, there is another group called the Four Perils. I do think there is a good chance that the Four Perils will show up in the show, as one of them is Hundun, who is the embodiment of primeval chaos. However, I was thinking, what if the Monkie Kid writers linked together the Four Spiritual Primates and the Four Perils? I'm just saying, there are 4 primates and 4 perils, so it would be cool if each primate was linked to a peril. Sun Wukong would be linked to Hundun, since Hundun is the embodiment of chaos, and Sun Wukong can be linked to the chaos in the original text. And Macaque could link to Chong-Chi, which represents deviousness. And then for the other spiritual primates, the red-buttocked baboon could link to Taoshi. The Taoshi represents gluttony, and the red-buttocked baboon was said to have knowledge of everything. So perhaps the red-buttocked baboon is a glutton for knowledge, and is obsessed with finding out everything. The bare-armed gibbon could link to Taowu, which represents ignorance. The bare-armed gibbon is said to be able to seize the sun and the moon and manipulate stars and planets. Perhaps they are too engrossed in celestial matters and so are ignorant of the goings-on of the world. This would all make sense, since these 4 primates are called the 4 spiritual primates or the 4 celestial primates, but the literal translation is actually the 4 monkeys of Havoc. So it would make sense for them all to be linked to the 4 perils. So how would this explain Macaque having chaos powers? Well, there are 2 possibilities. Possibility 1. If the 4 primates are linked to the 4 perils and Macaque is linked to Chong-Chi, then let's say Chong-Chi stole Hundun's powers and energy, then maybe that would affect Macaque and cause him to have chaos powers. Again, obviously this is a bit of a far-fetched idea, but it would be pretty cool if this happened in the show. And this ties into this video I made where I suggested that Gong Gong is the mystery villain in the chaos that the nine-headed demon was talking about. And some sources suggest that Gong Gong is the same character as Chong-Chi, so Gong Gong, aka Chong-Chi, may have overthrown the other perils. And Chong-Chi stealing Hoon-Doon's powers would make a ton of sense considering, while Hoon-Doon is the embodiment of chaos, its name also means one who is ignorant or confused, and it is said to exist in a state of confusion. In fact, Hoon-Doon's most well-known story involves a bunch of men just drilling holes in its head over a week until Hoon-Doon dies. But let's go on to possibility 2 on how the four primates being linked to the Four Perils could relate to Macaque having chaos powers. What if all the Four Perils are linked to Hoon-Doon and thus all have chaos powers? In my last video on the Four Spiritual Primates, I suggested that not only could Macaque be made from Sun Wukong, like in the book, but the other two spiritual primates could be made from Sun Wukong as well. This is an idea Journey to the West Research suggested on his blog, and in my video I discussed exactly how the other spiritual primates could be made from Sun Wukong in Monkie Kid, like being his reflection or a blood creation. Anyway, let's assume that the writers did use this idea of the other three spiritual primates all being made from Sun Wukong. So, let's say that the Four Perils mirror the four spiritual primates, and the other three perils are made from Hoon-Doon. Hoon-Doon is the main peril of chaos, and perhaps he spawned the others, and so they all have some form of chaos powers because of that. Sun Wukong is the main primate, and he spawned the other primates. So if each peril is a derivative of Hoon-Doon, and the primates mirror this, this would explain why Macaque has chaos powers, because Sun Wukong is of the chaos, due to being linked to Hoon-Doon, and so the other spiritual primates are all connected to the chaos because they are connected to Sun Wukong, and also the other perils which are connected to Hoon-Doon. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this wasn't too complicated or confusing. Feel free to like and subscribe.